you guys. So, for the 2 subscribers and for me as the anthropologist, making an observation of the events. So, no matter how many people listen or watch, and I have to say this to my ego, I still have to do what it is that I came to do. So, me and computers, we've had a connection for a while, meaning, as a tool. So one of the things that I thought I would be doing right now, and one of the reasons why 2 years ago or so I started to do coding, was because I thought that people were going to do Web3 and that they would want to do contracts, et cetera, because that's the thing that they were building. Now it is switched, and now it has actually gone back to centralized tech. So with that being said, you have a massive amount of investments from an institution. We know who this institution is. During the Web3 hype, people were calling for these institutions to invest in the infrastructure to get more people involved. But unfortunately, it went the opposite direction. So it actually went back to major 3 or 4 companies basically ruling everything. And you also have to understand a lot of companies, from everything from water to electricity to food, is under one conglomerate. That's one of the reasons why marketing, partnerships, things like that, is very easy to do when you own everything. Think of the Avengers, right? So there you go. And you can also build your equity and all that good stuff. But anyway, so we have Web3 gone, and we have the opposite polarity of Web3, which is the manifestation of what people would call mercenaries. But because we want to be an anthropologist and not have our stuff taken down or people saying that you're calling for something, we're just going to call them, a router, roots, or whatever you want to call them. And these are basically people who make agreements in order to obtain power. Now, that would make sense, and people who argue this would make sense if there were actual money, like the money was actually worth something. I'm not naming names because there's so many names. So anthropologically, this kind of doesn't make sense because you have money that's always backed by trust. And they have already obtained this trust by establishing the companies and playing by the rules. Anytime you're in like a gaming situation with the market, it's basically a game, and then the players, and then you wait until the interest rate's going to come up, or hey, if we make the decision to do this with the debts and blah blah blah, then they would do a counter of this. The game situation doesn't come down to the people level yet. It stays pretty high up, which is from the institution of this creation, from the beginning of this creation, whatever you want to call it. So the idea of a mercenary, is very strange. And someone had made a very good kind of point, even though I don't believe in this, is the fact that it's much like the Ninth Gate, where he plays a kind of mercenary who is a fool in the fact that he doesn't understand what's going on, but he obtains this evolution because he's going through a process and because he was chosen. Okay? Which is I guess it's indicative of a lot of people who truly believe that machinery will help people, and it is the only thing that is keeping people from evolving. With that being said, with such a restriction of knowledge, because if you want to learn JavaScript, and I had to learn JavaScript myself, JavaScript is technically owned by one company, And then the information that you get has to come from a foundation. And this foundation is like a board of people that make a decision about how much information you're going to get regarding this tech. Then you have these people who create frameworks to basically make it easier for you, but ultimately you don't really get to see how this stuff actually works on the back end. It's almost a lab rat kind of situation where you're continuously learning nothing in order to manifest something on the screen. But the thing is, people were paying a lot of money for that, and there was a lot of players in the game who were willing to bet on high risk gameplay. So, are we really dealing with something like that? Or are we dealing with another kind of situation? So, there's so much more to this situation, but ultimately they do believe that this type of computer, the physical manifestation of the computer, is to match something in existence, which is like a neural net. Okay, doesn't technically have to have a computer. It just needs to be interconnected. So I did read some articles where they were saying that it needs to be set. It needs to be set and noded into our reality. And you could go through Michael Crichton's work. You don't even have to go through his papers. You could just look at his fiction, and you can see that this involves swarm networks like agents, nanoparticles, satellites, things like that. It's just the computer itself is manifesting itself in a physical, like a host. And that is essentially what they're wanting to do. Because ultimately, whenever you look at any sort of matrix, any mathematics, the physical physics mathematics, I'm sorry, I'm talking over myself. The physics, once you get past elementary, goes into models. And these models are proven not to exist. They all fail at one point or the other, meaning that you have a split model, and the joining together would be a gravitational theory. I forgot what it's called. But you have the theory of relativity, which is a theory, and then you have the quantum a theory. The quantum theory is absolutely machine model, because it doesn't take any kind of real values. Everything is based on probabilistical maths and positional math. That's all it is. And there's no proof of this except for, the particle accelerators that they have, which is not a proof because they've had particle accelerators for a very long time. It's just they have, of course, put the particle accelerators with some sensors in it and put it in a simulated vacuum, and then of course they get a number from the computer. But if you take it outside of that, what do you get? You don't get anything, because you're dealing with something that cannot be measured. We as a human being, just like the plants and animals, interact with our environment, including weather, the sun, the moon, the ocean, the lakes, everything in our environment we receive information from. Getting data from the sun is real. If you look up the definition of data, it will tell you that data comes through the sun. That information comes through the sun, just like plants get nutrients from the sun. We get a kind of nutrients from the sun also. That's why you have scurvy, and people have to eat certain foods in order to avoid that in certain parts of the world. So there's no separation, and whenever you try to put these mathematical models up, they always fail. But I mean, even if you look at the ideal of trying to force it, which is what most genetics models are, mathematical models. You look at some slicing and dicing and using virus vectors or bacteria vectors in order to alter something in the person's body. That doesn't always work. If it is work, it costs you about $1 million to do. So, and looking at the cost of these so-called models is supposed to be helping people. The only people who's able to afford this are people who are at enterprise levels, and they're taking a loss. Now, they could get a cash, deductible or some kind of deductible on the back end for playing the game and saying, hey, we're going to go along with it because it's the future. Okay? But ultimately, it's not backed by anything. It's only backed by trust. So you're basically having a society. I don't know what to say. I mean, I have no idea what this is. I've never seen anything like it before. Because basically for Texas food stamps, you have to be working in order to get food stamps. You can try to get food stamps if you're an adult and you don't have kids once every 3 years. You can only get it for about 3 months. You have to have the ability to go to an office, do some job searches, etc., and some other qualifying things. After 3 months or a month or so or 2 months or so, you're off and you're by yourself. That's it for you if you don't have any children or kids. That's like if you live in a town that you can, has a bus system and all that good stuff. And then there are some issues, and I used to work at one of these centers. There's some issues where people would send stuff in through the computer, and they would notate everything would be perfect, and it's sent in through the computer, and it would be received on the other end entirely blanked. And the person needing the food would be penalized like a month or two with no food because of how their computer stuff is set up, to where they automatically just load off the person for sending information. And there's many examples of this kind of stuff. With that being said, it almost sounds medieval, to be quite honest with you. And then also obtaining jobs are very weird because everything is shut off. Like, you can't go to the place. There's no way of interacting with the people that you're trying to get employed by. Everything is just shut down, behind walls and behind bricks. And nobody knows anything, and even the people in there may not know everything that's going on, and then the information is just sent to them automatically. So it's more of like the opposite polarity of what they're trying to say that they're doing. And maybe when it comes to the environmental stuff, they're doing the same thing. Instead of interacting with nature, instead of being along for the ride for human evolution, they are trying to overthrow it with a synthetic evolution, meaning picking and choosing the people that they think is worthy enough to evolve, which doesn't make sense because you have viruses. But they said that it's clear on the website that a adversary decided to use viruses as a way of obtaining a way to decrease the population, so then they could increase their population. So, and that's been fairly clear that was determined, that was the idea or concept, or somewhere in there, allegedly. But not allegedly, it's literally on the website. They've been named an adversary for a long time by multiple people. Also, you have a state problem. The states within a certain structure wanted to make some deals with countries, which they, I think, legally can do, but with this newer model, they're not able to do that. They still have to go through their parent, which is ultimately the the institution that they're under. And there are a lot of people that are not very happy with that situation, and I don't know what's going to come of that. That's pretty much it. I'm just pretty much just sort of like observing how things are, seeing what people's ideas are. I don't believe that this is a mercenary situation in the traditional way. It would have to be something else, because ultimately they could have just used their previous platform to do what it is that they could do. And because there is no trust, there is no trust that 1, 2, and 3 will go along, because if you're going to collapse the labor market, how are then you're going to fund the rest? So basically, the only thing I can think of is the institutions themselves, planetary wide, because I'm going to say it like that, planetary wide is going to be funding each other and accumulating debt, and then the people that's up under them will no longer be the people that they are supposed to be interacting with and have conversations with, which makes sense, because the people at the table and the people directly talking to them are the people that they chose to fund. So if you're not really getting any direct funding, you're not included amongst the decision makers. The decision makers are the people that are getting funded. Like I said, it's like a man with a lot of wives. The one with the money, the woman with the most money is the one that's most loved. That's all I have to say, and I hope you guys have a great day. Bye.